Mehdi Hasan gave a scathing monologue about Aipac and the detriment it causes our democracy. We talk often on this channel about big money in politics and the way it can corrupt things, and Aipac might just represent the worst of it all, as it's far right with mega donor conservative money that is now primarily being used to unseat progressives in Democratic primaries. So I thought looking over a couple clips from his segment would be a great way to cover this.
Aipac panders more and more to the far right. In fact, Aipac's targeting of progressives has turned them into the perfect vessel for GOP megadonors trying to kill progressive policies. And looky here, earlier this month, Politico reported that Aipac has now become the biggest source of Republican donations in the most competitive Democratic primaries, making it a clear case of GOP meddling. Now, Aipac would say that they're simply fighting off the extremists in Congress, a classic racist dog whistle they love to invoke against the non-white members of the squad. We've seen them use this before in their 2021 attack ad against Congresswoman Ilhan Omar when they told voters to stand against terrorists. Ah yes, because calling out legitimate war crimes while being a black Muslim woman must make you pro-terrorism, right?
And keep in mind, this is a super PAC whose leadership has openly said their goal is electing the most conservative Democrats possible and hopes to move politics right. It's made up of nearly half GOP conservative donors who are donating to Democrats but never have before, never will again, with the sole purpose of unseating these progressives and anti-Israel voices while they largely don't support anything that's an actual left-leaning value. Over 60% of the donors are billionaires or top-level executives of who oppose the labor movement, something that's core to Democrats and progressives. So this is big money not only infiltrating politics, but doing so on the Democratic side from across the aisles, only in hopes to move the party further right. And the proof is in the pudding with the racist ads that they run, like labeling a Muslim woman a terrorist for the sake of being a Muslim.
The truth is that Aipac couldn't care less about fighting actual extremism. Quite the opposite, they're actually supporting it. In the aftermath of January the 6th, during the 2022 midterms, Aipac chose to endorse over 100 members of Congress who voted against certifying the 2020 election results, who chose to perpetuate Donald Trump's baseless election conspiracy theories, even after those lies had inspired a violent insurrection from America's own right-wing extremists, or as the FBI likes to call them, domestic terrorists. So much for a united democracy. Oh, and just in case you think the people who dislike or are opposed to Aipac are all brown Muslims like me, I would remind you that one of their most vocal critics is another pro-Israel lobbying group, a more liberal, more moderate pro-Israel lobbying group, J Street, which has accused Aipac of undermining American democracy, as well as the, quote, true interest of American Jews and pro-Israel Americans who Aipac often claims to represent.
And this is another wonderful point to raise. The issue with Aipac isn't that it's a pro-Israel group, which is how they want to act in order to play the victim card. It's that they support extremism, actual terrorism domestically, and pro-January 6th candidates. They support other right-wing goals, but are donating to progressives, stoking racist fear towards progressives, the Arab community, and even other pro-Israel lobbies that are much more liberal are willing to call this out. This is a super PAC pushing the boundaries of big money in politics as far right as they can go. But because Zionism is such a strong belief in America, largely because of the money behind it, most politicians aren't willing to voice that the way they are other bits of corruption.
On the subject of who Aipac represents, again, we have to be careful here. Aipac consists of Americans, not Israelis, and we have to avoid the dual loyalty trope when it comes to American Jews. Having said that, Aipac does often tend to take the Israeli government line over the American government line. For example, when it came to President Obama's Iran deal, and have done so for decades. Back in the 1960s and 70s, the prominent, influential, very respected Democratic Senator William Fulbright, the longest-serving chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee in U.S. history, he said he wanted to see Aipac register as a foreign agent, but it didn't go anywhere. Now, today, thankfully, some progressives in the Democratic Party are finally starting to take action to fight back against the influence of Aipac, against this Republican front group. This past March, over 20 advocacy organizations, including Jewish Voice for Peace and Justice Democrats, launched a coalition called Reject Aipac, which says its goal is to defend the members of Congress who are being targeted by this pro-Israel organization.
And the saddest part of it all is there's a bunch of Democrats that we would consider to be on the right side of most things who are just strictly on the wrong side here. Hakeem Jeffries, Jarrett Moskowitz, just to name a few. Their beliefs in this regard are bought and paid for. We covered on the channel Thomas Massie just the other week or a few weeks ago, publicly admitting that Congress members have an Aipac person who regularly calls and checks in on them, how they're going to vote, and largely directs that, or at least candidates fear voting against them and their interests for fear of the money being drained from them and put into a candidate who could then unseat them. And as Mehdi said, they are very successful at doing that. And this is the real reason that there isn't outrage at the genocide Israel is carrying out, why you only hear a few Congress members willing to speak out against this. It's because those who do know that millions, literally millions of dollars will be coming against them in their next election in hopes to remove them from power. Thus, many just toe the line, decide to keep quiet, and take the bribes that are handed out to them to do so.